So I'm not a curator, but I do produce shows that have involved artists, and they have involved a subject that is elsewhere. So I'm coming at this idea of the responsible storyteller from maybe a slightly overly Christian position, which is odd, but this idea of empathy, because I don't know about you, but being misrepresented is one of the most frustrating things. And I'm going to talk about this idea of misrepresentation, particularly through a project that I conducted at the ICA with a group of artists and comedians and theatre and TV actors, which was a sitcom based in the art world called The Last of the Red Wine. Yeah, you got it. And this came about because I was becoming incredibly frustrated at the way that artists misrepresented art and artists and all practitioners within our world, contentious term, but we'll come back to that, are misrepresented in mainstream entertainment. What I have for you here is, oops, a collection of, how do I? Okay, we've got a classic technology situation. Would you come and have a fiddle? Okay, all right. Oh, bless you. Okay, so what I'm talking about here is, I think Tom mentioned earlier on, fidelity of subject matter, and I suppose when we think about representation and integrity, we think about the integrity of the subject matter and its mode of distribution, and maybe some sense of responsibility for that, the parity of the subject matter to those that are enacting it is a bit of a problem, but I'm going to just gloss over that for now because I want to get to what it feels like to be misrepresented. Okay, so I've been working with the art critic Colin Perry, and we've been collecting clips of art on television, just television, not film. And we noticed a series of typologies emerging. I'm going to play you just a few clips, and we'll see if we can identify the origins of those typologies. Oh shit, I forgot, I've already done that for you.
What do you do, Brian?
I'm an artist. I'm an artist.
Oh, what kind of thing do you do?
Anger. Pain. Fear. Aggression.
Watercolours or?
It's a bit more complex than that.
But ain't nothing but a bunch of scribbled lines.
Throw stones if you must, B.A., but I want you to know that most great artists during their lifetime were ridiculed and scoffed at. It was not until they became a part of the great dark earth, until they were dead, that their true genius was discovered, and perhaps that fate awaits me.
I don't care how famous of an artist you are or how much money you have, that was sick and twisted and you are perverted. My sister was murdered, so to make me play a dead body without even asking me what I think about it is cruel.
I'm very sorry. I had no idea about your sister. I should be more sensitive. Sometimes the conceptual side of my work just, takes me away. But where you see a sick prank, I see the contrast of your incredible beauty, so alive and vital, with the ugly violence of the setting.
Hello, you there. I'm talking to you. You! What did you do?
Oh, daub or two. An ill-favoured thing, but mine own.
Shouldn't you have asked?
Asked? You have me ask God if I can paint the sky next.
It's my cottage, not God's.
And the most attractive I've seen all summer.
Oh. You think so?
Oh, yes. Yes, it's beautiful. The proportions, it's like a handsome face. It has structure. Looks good now, it'll look good in 50 years. The thing of beauty is a joy forever.
How long will it take?
Well, you know what they say, you can't hurry art.
Oh, I'm not trying to hurry you. It's just that I have to go out later.
Oh, that's all right. I've got everything I need. Palette, easel, subject.
Do you ever sell them? The finished canvases?
Occasionally.
Perhaps before you leave, you'd knock on the door.
Maybe I could beg a cup of something.
Might be arranged.
You should do that more often.
What?
Smile. It lights up the day. The skin has a luster that you don't often see outside porcelain.
Mr. Mullerland, oh, this may sound terribly naive, but what is it your sculptures are attempting to say?
Never explain, madam. My work is beyond syntax.
Thank you.
Okay, that's quite phenomenal. So that was Spaced, the 18 General Hospital, Lovejoy, Miami Vice. So it's amazing where art and artists and the art world crops up, and how over and over the same old cliches crop up. I think we can attribute, you know, the sort of the Van Gogh figure of the artist to the 18 scenario, and then perhaps something like the alleged CIA involvement in the pushing of abstract expressionism as a sort of potent, macho, sort of American practice. That would explain a lot of this sort of macho, never explain, madam, I'm in control idea of art and artists. So what we're looking at here is cliches. And I know it says I'm going to talk about interdisciplinarity in artistic practice, but really the nub of this is the usefulness of cliches. And what are cliches? Well, personally, I avoid cliches like the plague, obviously. And it's interesting to think about their historic roots, and it came from typographic practices. And compositors and typesetters found that certain words would recur over and over. So these words like on, the, of, but would remain made up complete, so they could just slot them in. And then it was discovered over time that certain phrases would recur, like women of a certain age. And so those whole phrases were left intact. And the compositor would say, oh, would you pass me, these were called, the women of a certain age thing. These things were known as cliches, and that name came from the sound of the printing presses. So inherent within the very idea of the cliche is that of mechanical repetition, and a cliche is indeed something that we just reach for mechanically, and we reiterate, we repeat. And they can be arrived at in three ways, and they can be just the mindless perpetuation of a cliche, or they can actually be arrived at from first principles. If you think of, say, maybe someone who actually is living in the time of the plague, and actually the plague is something that they don't want too much to do with, they would avoid something like the plague. So that is a legitimate way to arrive at a cliche. Or the third way is that you're handling it ironically, because if I utter a cliche and you all recognise it as one, then we all go, whoa, that's a cliche, and that some form of solidarity emerges in the room. So they're all relevant ones. Now I've got a series of cliches that I've identified as being sourced in Hamlet. If you'd like to, it's like 2 minutes long. Do you want to watch a quick whiz through of Hamlet? And yeah.
Frailty, thy name is woman. My mind-eye, Horatio. Neither a borrower nor a lender need to thine own self be true.
Something is rotten in the state of Denmark.
And each particular hair to stand on end, most foul. Therefore, as brevity is the soul of wit, words. Words. Words! Though this be madness, yet there's method in it. What a piece of work is a man. The plays, the plays. Or not to be. Aye, there's the rub. That's conscience that make cowards of us all.
Oh, it's me. The lady doth protest too much, methinks.
Words without thoughts never to heaven go. I must be cruel, only to be kind. For 'tis the sport to have the engineer hoist with his own petard.
To the sweet.
Now pile your dust upon the quick and dead. The rest is silence.
Okay, so there we can. Oh, you want to see that? Yeah. Okay, there we can identify Hamlet as the source of many cliches, but usually cliches they're sort of oddly unauthored. They were authored at some point a very long time ago, but we've lost contact with who may have coined these phrases or these ideas. They just seem to arrive fully formed, and we just pass them around unthinkingly. So this is what I was approaching in this art world sitcom project, was this the cliches that the world at large, or media, or program writers, script writers, always seem to grasp for. And can we make new cliches, more accurate cliches, or can we actually displace cliches altogether? So I brought together, as I was saying, people from different disciplines. So then we have the very difficult situation of asking comedians to say something really amusing about art, and of course, not having looked at it as closely as we have, they do resort to those sort of cliches. So some sort of disciplinary manipulation needs to go on my part as a producer, curator, jester, person. And so let's think about disciplinarity, because before we get into disciplinary, we have to be disciplinary first off. So it's quite useful to look at the two meanings of the word discipline, one being a branch of learning or body of knowledge, and then the second being the control exerted among subordinate groups, often through punishment. Okay, so I think with both those ideas of discipline, there is a theme of restriction running through. And indeed, academic disciplines are defined by what they exclude in order to constitute themselves. So, for instance, the American Medical Association excludes acupuncture, and Uri Geller is often excluded by members of the Magic Circle. He's deemed to be a mystifier rather than a magician. And also art, until very recently, has excluded puppetry.
Now, the temptation for the avant-garde is to heroically pursue knowledge forged in opposition to these exclusions, but as you can see, that's not always interesting.
Yeah, let that be a warning. Okay, so So interdisciplinarity then is something a little more sophisticated than just doing what you shouldn't do. I'm sure that ties in with what Dave was talking about, but we'll come back to that later, because I can't quite think it's even 60 degrees at the moment. Let's look at interdisciplinarity. As it was originally a pedagogical impulse that was played out mainly in English departments, it seems, in the early 20th century. F.R. Leavis, at Cambridge and so on, were trying to establish the subject as a viable discipline, because until then universities had been structured very much around Aristotelian ideas, and Aristotle's hierarchy of disciplines goes from the theoretical to the practical to the productive, namely theology, mathematics, physics, ethics, politics, fine art, poetics, engineering and home economics. But then, interdisciplinarity in the latter part of the 20th century was used more as a mode of institutional critique, and I'm thinking particularly of the Birmingham University Centre of Contemporary Cultural Studies, which was set up by Richard Hoggart in 1964 and was also overseen by Stuart Hort later on. And for them, cultural studies was a way of coordinating activities of other disciplines, and also for monitoring the relationships between culture power. But in practice, interdisciplinarity can mean a number of things, and I'm going to give you a little visual mnemonic using this cardigan. So interdisciplinarity, we have okay, this is disciplinarity. We have someone operating within their discipline, and they are adhering to the norms of instruction and practice and research methodology. Okay, we have cardigan worn as cardigan. And then let's bring two people together from different disciplines, and they're trying to find common ground. This is a very good productive form of interdisciplinarity. So that here we have, I think, the cardigan as blanket. Okay, it's serving a purpose, but it's not doing anything against cardigan nature. And the third position is space between two disciplines. So we have maybe cardigan round waist, cardigan neither as garment or non-garment. It's just sort of there, looking ready to be one or the other. And then we have people from two disciplines misunderstanding one another, but actually maybe leading to invention. So, like this. Sort of misreading the a priori, that which is taken for granted, but actually coming up with a whole new idea. And then there is the related situation of two people from different disciplines sort of willfully misunderstanding one another's ways of doing things and coming up with something not very useful at all. Okay, so there's very useful visual mnemonic here. But if you are lucky, you might be working in a discipline with which you are not familiar, and you might do that thing of coming up from first principles with something that does make sense with that, inside that discipline. Which is exactly what I happen to have done today. I was thinking about historical costume of the Jester, and I was also thinking about information technology, how to signal to you that the text that I'm about to read, so I'm really out of breath from all of that content. How the text that I'm about to read to you is not my voice, but Roland Barthes, because it's very easy to confuse the two, I say. So I got my bladder on a stick here, and then let me just show you. See some very tiny writing, and then if I look, I actually have a medieval microfiche, which is a viable IT tool. So this is an instance of excellent interdisciplinary innovation. Okay, so now I can read that Roland Barthes says, interdisciplinarity is not the calm of an easy security. It begins effectively, as opposed to the mere expression of a pious wish, when the solidarity of the old disciplines break down in the interests of a new object and a new language, neither of which has a place in the field of the sciences that were to be brought peacefully together. This unease in classification being precisely the point from which it is possible to diagnose a certain mutation. So kind of interesting use of evolutionary terminology there. And I think the curator-producer can and possibly should operate at this level, engineering these encounters between the disciplines to mutate and also challenge that which one another takes to be the a priori of their disciplines. And the curator, I think, is assumed to be a responsible storyteller because they are supposedly of the same discipline as the artist. That is, they adhere to the same models and exemplars and know the same a priori. They have, I think, we can now relive Richard Rorty into this discussion of interdisciplinarity, which is very useful in terms of his idea of final vocabulary. So the curator and the artist are assumed to have the same final vocabulary. And the final vocabulary are those things that we all think are, you know, real or irrefutable, or it's just not useful to not adhere to them, maybe. I've collected, sorry, I just put the next microfiche on the machine. Okay, let me just give you a quick. The quick definition of Rorty's final vocabulary is: if doubt is cast on the worth of these words, their user has no non-circular argumentative recourse. Those words are as far as he can go with language. Beyond them, there is only helpless passivity or resort to force. So these are the assumptions that we make about our own discipline. And I've collected a few from postgraduate students and their tutors over the past week, and they come up with things like, oh, I've gone over time. Art is worthwhile. Art is challenging. The viewer matters. Interdisciplinarity is good. Art is never constant, it is always self-radicalizing, and there are no a priori. So these sound really familiar, don't they? This idea of these ideas that we just reach for and we forget to prod, and they also sound faintly ridiculous when you say them out loud. It seems that these a priori, these nuggets of our final vocabulary are in actual fact our own cliches, our personal cliches, but they're very different to someone from another discipline's idea of cliches, or the cliches that they reach for when they try to describe what we do. So, with this sitcom project, we brought in comedians to talk about art, but we had to work with the comedian's final vocabulary, which is essentially art is ridiculous, and it kind of tips us into, well, it tipped us art practitioners into a very precarious, almost sort of self-traumatizing position, because we had to explain our a priori all of the time, constantly, and say why it was not ridiculous, and yet still keep what we were doing funny. So we had to legitimize our own cliches and delegitimize other people's. So, like for instance, whenever a comedian had to come up with a really amusing artwork, they just came up with this idea of a sculpture made out of meat. So it's interesting to think about why that is annoying. And I think it's to do with the viscerality and the dumbness of it, and it just offends our intellectual vanity, perhaps. So I'm going to play you a little bit, a tiny snippet of the sitcom. And I want you to look out, if you can, for the kind of the internal negotiations of these two layers and levels of cliches, and think about how on earth you can make art stand on its own 2 feet in such a conflicting situation. And I'm going to go and sit down while this is playing, and then that's it.
Okay, like last week, the week before that, I'm going to be just a little bit early. This seminar is going to be about 10 minutes instead of the usual 2 hours. I've got an incredibly important art fair to go to, so you can obviously understand why I've had to do that. But you carry on with your peer critiquing, okay? I want that to continue.
I've had a real problem there in my studio.
Great, that's fantastic, isn't it? That's fantastic. Let's look at you. So, who have you been looking at? Right, Potter. Good choice. Yes.
Yeah, I've been looking at Beatrix Potter because I'm interested in anthropomorphism. So I made this rock.
Sorry, you found this rock?
No, I made it.
Why didn't you just find it?
Because I wanted to make it out of rock.
Right.
I found a rock and then I made that bigger rock into this rock.
Right, so you just copied the rock that you found?
No, I mimicked it. What's it about?
No, right, it's not what it's about, but what it's doing that's important. So, what is it doing?
Oh, well, it's doing being a rock.
Right.
I want it to do being a Beatrix Potter rock, an anthropomorphized rock. But what I want to know is whether, to the viewer, the waistcoat's too much.